All right. Hello, everybody. How's everybody doing? Welcome to Philo Sapience, where religion meets reason. And we are back with another excellent, thought provoking stream on morality. And you know who our guinea pig is. Uh, we have for you Hamza Tzortzis, and we are reviewing one of his videos where he tries to prove that morality, the existence of morality, prove the existence of God, or you know, existence of probably objective morality, if you want to call it that way, proves the existence of God. So before we do that, welcome Martin, welcome Kyali, welcome to my co-hosts. How are you two doing?
I'm doing well. Welcome, Philo. To you as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Martin. Shall we jump straight into
Yeah,
thick of things?
yeah. I just want I just want to jump into it. That's all.
Yeah, you've been waiting for a long time, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's start.
Thing
Let's see where.
back.
Let me just clear. I think we'll have to fiddle around a little bit as to where the right point to start this review is, and let's listen to it from here, right?
So what I want to do today is start with meta-ethics and refer to a medical example because we're in a medical school. And from that, hopefully we're going to show that God exists as a result of what we're going to conclude. I don't want to give it away now. And then we're going to go into moral epistemology and talk about the Islamic stance on moral epistemology. And I'm
I
going
think
to
you can
contrast
start
the
from
Islamic stance with
1504.
something called...
Start from 1504. Yeah, from here.
that point of view. Makes sense of Islamic theology. So, objective moral values exist. It makes sense of our moral intuitions. Now, I want to now start to talk about, if that's the case, then God exists. Think about this, right? If snipping the spinal cord of a patient that doesn't require his spinal cord or her spinal cord to be snipped with intent and consciously, if that is objectively morally wrong, as we've all agreed, as we all have agreed, then it follows God exists. Sounds like a crazy claim, right? It does, doesn't it? Okay, let me explain to you, all right? Don't worry, I'm not that crazy. So listen, here is the basic logic of the argument. It's an axiomatic argument. So we start with the axiom, the first principle, that there are objective morals. If you start with that, it necessitates God's existence, okay? Are you ready for this? It's not a leap of faith. It's not kind of, some kind of false logical inference. No, it's actually, it follows logically. Let me explain. Number one, if objective morals exist, God exists. Number two, objective morals exists. Three, therefore, God exists. And let me just elaborate why. So, why is it the case that if we believe axiomatically, first principle, that
Just
objective
pause it
morals
right now.
exist, that God...
I want to clarify something. Earlier in the video, Hamza has defined objective as something not dependent on a limited mind. Now, this is how he has
Yeah,
defined objective.
this is excellent point because I had noticed it
Yes.
as well, and I thought I
Yeah.
would play that part and
Yeah.
let everybody know that this is a deception, right? Why?
Yes. Exactly.
Because they have to do it. Otherwise, when they come to God, they just can't justify it, right? Independent of
Yeah.
mind, right? And independent of any emotions or limited emotions. That's what he used,
Yeah.
or feel
Yeah.
limited feelings, right?
Limited mind. Yeah. Limited intellect.
Yeah, limited intellect and even limited. He talks about those both the things, right? Limited intellect and limited emotions and feelings, right? Humans have limited intellect and emotions and feelings. So he wants to exculpate, in a sense, I think, quote unquote, is exculpate his God from these two traps, rather.
Yeah, and interestingly, he gives the example. I think just immediately after that, he gives the example of an objective truth, which is 1 + 1 is equals to 2. Now, you could say that that is definitionally true, but since he's trying to prove that this is an objective truth which is independent of a limited mind. Now, if what he's trying to say is, I don't know, maybe I may confirm if my understanding is correct, because 1 + 1 is equals to 2. If you take it as I think it's called an analytical truth or an analytical fact. I don't know. In that might be incorrect. I don't know.
No,
But
it is an analytical truth, right?
it's
Yeah.
analytical truth. So,
Mhm.
I mean, someone could argue that we could say that this is definitionally true because you have
Right.
defined 1 plus 1 by, by saying that it's called 2. But if you want to say that 1 plus 1 equals 2, and you want to say that is objectively true, then and it is true because it is not dependent on a limited mind, then in a way, are you saying that it is objective because it is dependent on an unlimited mind? So it is still dependent, this fact of 1 plus 1 is equals to 2, because if you want to take this example and then apply it to morality now, so then this is what you seems to be implying. But 1 plus 1 is equals to 2. Now that would be true whether or not an unlimited mind exists or not. So this is not dependent on that.
Yeah,
Now I
but
think he'll move on.
one more
Yeah.
thing that I'm wondering, and maybe you already said it, and then I'm just paraphrasing it, or I didn't understand it, is if 1 plus 1 equals to 2, and you have your limited, it's not based on limited intellect. How would you know it is an objective truth? By the way, is that an objective truth in a sense?
Uh,
Is it
I,
objectively true? Because from your side, how would you assess it, whether it's really dependent on an independent mind? Or, I mean, because we are limited in our intellect, so it has to be true from our perspective, right? But all we can do is inject our perspective to knowing what it is, right?
mm. So you're sort of referring to the limitation of our mind,
Yeah,
and
in
and
assessing whether
sort
it
of
is
inferring
objective
that
or not.
we have
Yeah.
no way to determine whether our rational faculties or through rational faculties we can arrive at truth and reliably, basically.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue that, but I think we are giving, for right now, we might be granting that we can, at least to an extent, use our intellect to arrive at truth. I think for this,
Okay.
for the sake of this discussion,
For
I
the
think
sake
so.
of this argument, we
Yeah.
can conclude that, right? Right. Okay. All right. Moving on. Martin, you want to add something to it?
No, I'm just wondering why you guys talking about all of this when he's not said anything about this. Where is
He said it. I'm
no,
I
sorry,
think
but
Martin,
basically he
I
said
think
this
Martin,
earlier in this video. Yeah.
where is this investment coming from? He barely said anything, and you're talking about truths.
He was giving his argument, and I just wanted to clarify that this is how he's defined objectivity,
Right.
and I have a problem, with that. Basically,
yeah.
he has defined objectivity as something dependent on a limited mind.
Yeah, I think you missed that part, and that's why we are more talkative than you,
Everyone missed
for a
that part
change.
because
For a
we have not
change.
played that part.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
must exist because God is the only foundation to rationally explain objective morals. Why? Because God, number one, is not subjective. He transcends human subjectivity. He's outside of the universe. He can make the universal moral claim. God is Al-Alim, Al-Hakim, Al-Bar. He is the
Can we
knowing,
pause
the
it right now?
wise, and he is the
I mean, I think. Do you guys want to say anything about that? Mahadan, do you think he has said something now that you would like to comment on, or do you?
Not yet, because
Not
I
yet.
like to hear a little bit more first.
Okay.
Understand
Okay. Let's go ahead then. Okay.
good, the source of all goodness. And God's names and attributes are what you call maximally perfect. They are to the highest degree possible. All right? They are to the highest degree possible. They have no deficiency and no flaw. And they are perfect. So it follows when he commands, then his commands are good, and goodness is actually an essential part of his nature. As Professor Ian Markham, he explains, God explains the mysterious ought pressing down our lives, and God explains the universal nature of the moral claim. As God is outside the world, God the Creator can both be external and make universal commands. Also, he's an objective source for morality, because he has the totality of moral knowledge from that point of view. Not only this, his commands are not subject to anything. He's not limited by anything external to him. So by definition, he is an objective source. So from this point of view, it's starting to make sense that if there are objective moral truths, and objective moral truths are outside of limited self, limited mind, outside of social consensus and peer pressure, and they're outside, so to speak, they require some explanation and grounding. Remember metaethics, to explain the nature of this moral value and where it came from, its foundation.
Just wanted to ask you too if you noticed anything different here. His definition changed. His definition of objectivity has changed. Did you realize that, Kelly? Earlier, he was talking about, objectivity is something that transcends limited minds and limited intellects and all those things. Now he's talking about something else. Did you notice that?
I mean, what
But
now
he's
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 trying
he's
to.
taking a definition of some Ian whatever, right, Professor
Yeah,
Ian.
yeah,
So
yeah. He's
we can grant him that.
but
Okay,
he has
that's
but he has said in the beginning that God is not subject. I don't know. He said it that God does not have human subjectivity, and he's outside the universe, and therefore he's objective. So
yeah. That's what he has said right now. But
yeah,
then earlier he was talking about objectivism, not for limited minds, right?
not
Those are
yeah,
two
yeah. He
different
defined it
things.
that way.
Those are
Yeah,
two. Yeah,
not
those are
subject
two
to a
different.
limited mind. Yeah.
Those
So
are two
yeah,
different definitions he's playing with, basically.
yeah. So I mean, for example, and again, I think based on that, if he's saying he's just outside the universe, what, let's say, why do you need to be outside the universe? Just as a scenario, hypothetical scenario, would Hamza say that an alien race which does not live in on will live on this earth, would an alien race be considered an objective source for morality because they are not exposed to human subjectivity? They are not inside, they're not living on the earth, so they, whatever moral rules they give, they will be considered objective. Now Hamza also added the fact that he is all knowing, or he knows a lot, so maybe aliens know sufficiently well about humans for them for to assign rules to them. So in that case, would he say that yes, aliens are an objective source of morality, or could be an objective source of morality?
Yeah, but then he might object. Then they are not all knowing. I think so. At least there is a loophole for him to plug into, pretty much, right? I mean, he can plug
Okay,
that
so
loophole. And then
why do you need to be all knowing?
I
Like,
think
why can't
it's
sufficient?
just a
Yeah,
what do you call a smoke screen in a sense, right?
yeah. I mean,
It's a smoke
let's
screen.
say aliens know everything about humans that that needs to be known. So they are not all knowing, but they know about everything about humans that needs to be known for them to make these rules. So
Yeah,
they
yeah,
could say
but
that
then
it's
they
a,
are again. Yeah, I mean, I see your point. I mean, they know enough for a moral claim, right? Because they
yeah,
all you need to claim that it's an objective from his side. I mean, we can claim that uh, all anybody needs to know is all about humans, and then they could claim to be, in some sense, quote unquote, objective, right? From his definition, right? Outside of
mm,
Earth or outside of universe, right? But
mm,
then I think that's what I'm saying. He's playing around with different definitions, which he's probably not even aware that he's doing that, right? It might just be a lack of understanding on his part that he's not aware that he's just
right,
slipped into a different definition,
right. And I
right?
would, and you know what? I would ask them, what do they mean by when you say morals? So or morals or morality. How do they define that term? What do they mean by that?
I think an excellent point. I think we can we can let Madan be right. We can two of us can talk today,
Yeah.
right, Madan? Uh, I don't know what point I was gonna say. Madan, you want to jump in? I just forgot what I wanted to say, right? I wanted to talk about this definition of what is moral, right? I mean, however you go about it, I think in at some point you feel like you are getting into a circularity, right?
Exactly.
Morals, if you define morals as what is good and what is bad, and then when you maybe reach up to
Ask
that,
good and
okay,
bad. What do you mean by
and
good
what
and
is
bad?
what you mean by good and bad, then I think it loosely traps into itself into that circular kind of an argument. At least to me it
Right.
seems. But
So because the way they define morality, ultimately what it means is, when they say that objective morals exist, therefore God exists, and how they have defined morality is rules and commands from God. Now, if that is what it means, then what you're actually trying to say is if rules and commands from God exist, then God exists. So I mean, there is a kind of circularity that I find in it. I mean, one could argue that actually you're trying, it's sort of you're explaining it, and but yeah, it seems to be circular because that is how they would define morality.
No, exactly my thoughts. Exactly my thoughts. Because I feel I don't know. Madan can throw a little bit more light and probably a more nuanced light on this.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Tell me if I'm wrong, Madan.
I kind of not heard his argument really, so I don't really know what he's talking about at this stage, other than it seems like he's talking about the moral argument. But if he's defined these terms or talked about them in the first 20 minutes, and I've missed it, obviously, so I wouldn't know what to say.
I think he defined objectivity. The only thing, and I think we already discussed it, they've not defined morality, but I think uh, how how he's using that term, and ultimately, I think how all theists use it, at least Muslims and Christians. I think I'm saying that it seems to be, I mean, that the concept of God is built into morality, into the definition of morality. So in that case, the moral argument is kind of a circular argument.
Right. Well, a
What do you
circular
think?
argument, yeah, a circular argument will beg the question, or have a premise. The conclusion will be in the premises,
In the
right?
premise, yes, yes.
Yeah.
And I explained that. Do you want me to explain it again? Why I think that is the case?
No, you've already mentioned it.
Yeah.
So you're trying to say, you're trying to say that they define morals as something transcendent or universal, and binding and God-like. I'm not sure what. So something divine. You said something like they define morals as divine rules, and divine rules
Yes,
them.
yes, yes.
Do they actually? I've not heard them ever say that they define morals as.
No, that's
Yeah.
not divine. Yes, I mean divine commands, if you want to take it that way. Not
Yeah,
rules, divine commands.
well, yeah, that is the conclusion, of course. But is in the argument though, do they assume divine command theory is true? That's what I'm trying to say. Or
So
are they independent arguments to show? Are they making independent arguments entirely to show that it moves from one place to another, right? To end up with the conclusion that God is the best explanation for morality.
yeah. Now, I mean, the way they argue for it is they say objective morals exist. Now, why do they think that objective morals exist? They say, well, we have this intuition that objective morals exist, that that this must be true, right? And what they're trying to say is that it kind of is like and morality kind of imposes duties and responsibilities, rights and obligation, right?
Yeah.
So I think this is how they usually argue it. So I mean, yeah, you could say that. I mean, they are not.
Yeah, so
Uh,
they're independent premises. I'm not sure it will be necessarily circular. So if they're, for example, if it's like we discover that killing a baby, everybody thinks that killing a baby is wrong. Everybody thinks that killing a baby is not just wrong because they don't like the color of they don't, in the same sense that they don't like ice cream, but they think that it's actually wrong, like beyond independent to your just mere whims and preferences. That this is like a fact about the world, right? Right, and then the next point is that facts of this nature ought to be obeyed. And that's like another kind of intuitive kind of fact, right? And then they say something like things that are independent and universal like this or ought to be obeyed. Where is that coming from? And then they kind of insert a premise that you can't see. So slowly you're making independent arguments, right? You can't have an ought in a naturalistic universe.
exactly.
Yeah, you can't have an ought in a naturalistic universe, but then they substantiate it because there isn't any oughts. But if there is a God, then you can't, because God is something who
Yeah.
would do that.
I think I think I agree with that. Because in a way, all arguments, because I think what I was pointing out, you could argue that in that way all arguments might be circular, because
Yeah,
you're
exactly. Yeah.
ultimately trying to show that this is actually built into that, so you're trying to
Yeah.
show it ultimately in most of the arguments, so you would then say that okay, all arguments are circular then. So yeah, I think I think so, you're right. I think I tend to agree with you, but yeah, ultimately I think the question then I would ask is, and I would after agreeing with you on this point, is that if they think that oughts exist, um, I mean, why ought humans obey God? Well, I think that's an unexplained fact. They cannot. What argument do they have for saying that, oh no, humans ought to obey God? Why?
Mm-hmm.
So I think, yeah, that is, I think, an underlying important question that I don't think they have a good answer to, or they do try to answer it. And what I think Hamza is trying to say, that right now what he's trying to argue for is that, but I don't think that they can cross that bridge of is and ought, the prescriptive and descriptive. God knows everything. Okay, still, why should you obey what God says? He knows everything, but still, so what?
Yeah.
God knows everything is a descriptive fact. Now you're saying because he knows everything, we ought to obey him. That doesn't follow.
Yeah, I mean, I've not heard enough of what Hamza's saying here to
Mm.
think that he's got like an argument or something for that. But I think he just mentioned something like that, that some professor said that God best explains God explains the force of the ought, being there. So they seem to think that if there's a being who is commanding you to do something, and it's beyond all of us, and there's some
Yes.
sort of pressure, then that generates the ought, right? Right.
There's some sort of pressure.
Yeah, it seemed like it. He's not
I,
really being philosophically hygienic. He's just kind
yeah,
of
he's not.
he's being artful,
Yeah.
isn't it? He just said, some professor said God explains. What did he say? He said something like it best explains the pressure to ought to do something, pressure or
Mm.
force, or he said something like that, right?
He's saying
Rhetoric.
he's saying God is outside the universe, and therefore so it would
Yeah,
be
that's
an
why.
objective source of
Yeah.
morality.
See, that's what we mentioned, that his definition of objective changed from when he started. One point that we skipped in our playing or playback rather, is that where he defined objective morality as something independent of a limited intellect or a limited emotional being, or some emotion, someone who has limited emotions, something like that, right? And then now his definition, because he's quoting some doctor or Professor Ian whatever, right? So now his definition is different, but he seems to quote him as if he's thinking that, I mean, he aligns his thoughts, or his at least take aligns with what Professor said, right? So that's kind of a discrepancy in itself, I think. Anyway, shall we move on?
Yeah, if you want.
Well, the only way to explain it rationally is actually God's existence from the perspective that what explains the moral value, the objective moral value, are God's commands. Because God is outside of the universe, he is objective, he's not subjective, he has total moral knowledge, and all the things that we just mentioned. What else can ground objective morals? How else can you explain objective morals? And what's interesting, Allah says in the Quran, God says in the Quran, say, indeed, God does not order immorality.
Martin, you wanted to say something?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
There was a noise from your side, I think. Yeah.
So one would argue, well, surely there's alternatives. It can't just be God to rationally explain objective moral truths and values. There must be something else. Well, there is. There are alternatives, but I'm going to address why those alternatives are false. And those alternatives include biology, the Darwinian mechanism, for example, social pressure, moral realism, and constructivism. Now, these are meta-ethical approaches, or some people claim they can be meta-ethical approaches to explain objective morals. Now, before I go and deconstruct them, if you're philosophically minded, you know that there is a key response to what I've said so far. Anyone know what the key response is? It's a dilemma. What is it called? You threefold dilemma. Yes, excellent. So one would argue, hold on, Hamza. This is fuzzy logic. Let me try and break down what you're saying here. God can't be the kind of rational foundation for objective moral truths and values because here's a dilemma. And this is you threefold dilemma, or sometimes known as Plato's dilemma. It basically goes like this. All right, so you're saying God exists because objective moral values exist. If objective moral values exist, God must exist. Objective moral values exist, therefore God exists. Why? Because God's commands are the only foundation for objective moral truths. And therefore, if God's commands are the only foundation, therefore he must exist too. Okay, fair enough. But let's break it down. And this is what the dilemma is saying. Is something morally good because God commands it? Or does God command it because it's morally good? Here's the dilemma. Let me repeat it to you. Is something morally good because God commands it? Or does God command it because it's morally good? Now, one would argue this is a dilemma. There are two horns to the dilemma. You have the arbitrariness horn, and you have the independent standard horn. Let me explain what this means. So, if you adopt the first part, which is morality is defined by God's commands alone, then there's a little bit of a problem. You may be thinking as Muslims or as religious people, how's that a problem? Because you just explained that objective moral truths are based on God's commands. I have, absolutely. But there is an assumption here. When this part of the dilemma is basically saying that morality is defined by God's commands, it's just the command in an abstract sense, divorced away from God's nature. It's dislocated away from God's nature. So what they're saying is, well, God could say that you should kill all 55-year-olds, and it would be morally good because God just said it. We don't really appreciate that. It doesn't make sense of our moral intuitions. Also, if we take this out of the dilemma in this way, we would have to believe that there is nothing in the universe that is objectively morally wrong or objectively morally good. So we can't accept that part of the dilemma. Because they're assuming that it's just God's commands, and those commands are not linked to his nature in any way. They've dislocated God's commands away from his nature. So we can't say morality is defined just by God's commands in that way, because it makes it arbitrary, and it also makes us understand that there should be nothing in the universe that we should even consider as objectively morally wrong. Well, let's look at the other side of the dilemma. Well, morality is now external to God's commands, because it says, or does God command it because it's morally good? Well, if it's morally good, then you already know what good is to judge God's commands by. So therefore, good is outside of God's commands. Game over, argument done. So what they're saying here is that moral standards are now completely outside of God. So we're not going to accept that part of the dilemma either. So what's the solution? We can't take the arbitrariness horn, and we can't take the independent standard horn of the dilemma. What do? We can't say that in an abstract way, morality is just based on God's commands, because we don't believe God's commands are dislocated from his nature. And we can't accept the fact that morality is external to God, that good is external to God. So what do? Who's got the answer? Who has the answer? Sorry? Put the two together. Interesting. How?
You would say that objective good is based on God's nature.
Good, a false dilemma. Why? Because God is good. Option, it's a false dilemma. Why? Because God is good. Al-Bar, he is the source of all goodness. As Professor Akhtar in his really interesting book, really good book called The Quran and the Secular Mind, he says, there is a third alternative, a morally stable God of the kind found in scripture, a supreme being who would not arbitrarily change his mind about the goodness of compassion and the evil of sexual misconduct. Such a God always commands good because his character and nature are good. Now let me explain this response a little bit further. So, what we're saying is, there is indeed a moral standard, but it's not external to God. So there is indeed a moral standard, but it's not external to God. It necessarily follows from God's nature. Goodness is part of God. It's not external to God. So we do have a standard, but that standard is not external to God. It's actually part of who God is. It's part of his reality, because he is Al-Bar. He is the source of all goodness. So his nature contains within it the perfect, the maximally perfect, non-arbitrary moral standard. So when he makes a command, the command is a manifestation of his will, and his will doesn't contradict his nature, which is good, wise, loving, merciful. So we have a standard, but it's not external to God. And it is based on God's commands, but it's not arbitrary. It's actually part of God's nature. Shaboom, mic drop, as we say. Yeah, there you go. We've solved the dilemma. Now, a natural response from someone who doesn't agree with this, like an atheist or an agnostic or whoever, they may argue, well, you must know what good is to define God as good, therefore you haven't solved the problem. Well, this is a big philosophical discussion about the kind of necessity of God's goodness. I don't want to get into that, but a good response to this would be, well, God defines what good is because he's the only being worthy of worship, and the only being worthy of worship is the highest moral being. So, we've solved the kind of response here, the kind of Yusuf's dilemma, it doesn't break down our argument. So God's commands and God himself being the kind of rational foundation to
Can
explain
you pause
objective
it?
moral truths, it's still a strong argument. It still follows if objective morals exist.
So yeah, I think
Yeah, we have
he
done
has
almost the whole of video now, almost pretty
he
much.
has tried to resolve the Euthyphus dilemma, and I mean the kind of answer that he gave. I mean, I don't know the response that he gave at the end. Real, actually mentioning, I mean, to be fair, he did mention an objection, which is actually, I mean, a real objection to his response. But then the response, the counter response that he gave to that, like that God is good because He's the only being worthy of worship. I mean, and how do you know God is worthy of worship? What makes him worthy of worship? And you're gonna describe all these things that he's worthy of worship because he has made an entire video on this, right? That okay, God is worthy of worship because of this and this and this and this and this, right?
Yeah,
You can
yeah,
write
and
seven
we have
reasons.
critiqued as well.
And
We have
and if you
critiqued.
look at them, the
Mhm.
question is then you know that all of these things are good. Now then your response is circular because you have the question or the objection you have mentioned from the atheist side is this: you must know what good is if you are calling God or you're declaring God as God. And to the response to that is, well, God is goodness. God is the only deity worthy of worship, which can be the only maximally good being. Now, how do you know that He's the only being worthy of worship or He's even worthy of worship? You have these reasons because He's this and He has done that and He has done this and this. Well, you do know, and by that definition, then, or what that means is that you do know somehow that this is what makes something good. This is what makes something good. Well, who defined that? Who decided that these are the things that make it good, make someone or something good? So the question still is there. You have not responded to it at all.
Yeah, I think the circularity is pretty apparent over here. I mean, it's probably not as if I don't know whether Madin will agree to this, but it does seem pretty apparent to me at least that I mean, once he says God, God is good, basically, I think you have a definition of good, right? I mean, when you say God is good, goodness could mean anything, killing all the children, sorry, unaliving all the, whatever, right? Unaliving all the cheetahs in the world, maybe, is good, right? Unaliving all the birds of the world is good, right? And it's God's nature. And that's why it's good to do exactly what He commands. Right. So I think this is like this gets into this definitional circularity in a sense that you try to define good based on you know uh, your own intuition and try to what do you call project it onto the nature of God. Whence you just can't do that because you already think that what you think is good due to your moral intuitions is what good is, and that's why probably it's in God's nature. But it's
Also,
yeah,
also, I mean, one point about this is that I think he's not even admitted that he is actually just sort of labeling God's nature as good. He's saying that God, whatever God's nature is, it is good. We call it good. He's not admitted to that. He's saying no, God nature is good because He's the only deity worthy of worship now. And then he just sort of gave a very hurried response to or explanation of that fact. So which was not at all satisfactory, and I don't think it makes sense. It's completely circular. And
and
uh,
also one more thing, Kali. It just pushes aside the Euthyphro's dilemma by saying, no, 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 there is a third option. And
yeah,
that third option is not actually an option.
it's
It,
not.
it just pushes the problem one step behind or
Yeah, yeah,
pushes back, one more step, right?
yeah.
And he says that, because because it's part of God's nature. Now, someone could very fairly call and ask the question, why is it in God's nature?
Exactly.
Is it in God's nature because it
Even
is good?
exactly.
Or, so that's the question. Question isn't resolved as that, pretty much. The Euthyphro, the age-old, 2,500-year-old Euthyphro dilemma still stays, pretty much.
And
And a lot of
arbitrary.
people have claimed, a lot of philosophers in even in 21st or 20th century have claimed that Euthyphro's dilemma is dead and buried and all those things. But I think this response comes from J.L. Schellenberg. I don't know, maybe J.L. Schellenberg or Mackey. I don't know who it comes from, but one of those philosophers in 1970s responded to it. Probably Madan will know who the philosopher was who came back with this response, right? So sorry, Kelly, you wanted to add something.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've rightly pointed out that the question is just pushed one level or one step behind. That why is what makes God's nature good? Why is I think one point that he's trying to imply, sort of, is that by arbitrary, I think what he understands from arbitrary is something that changes. I don't know if is that impression correct? Because
Yeah,
seem to
he
imply that,
seemed to imply that. He seemed to
and that is not
imply that.
correct. Arbitrary does not mean something that needs to change. It could be static and fixed and unchanging, and yet it could be arbitrary. Because arbitrary just means that it is that way for no reason. It is that way, but it is there is no
There's
particular
no
reason for
reason
that for it
behind
to
it.
be.
Yeah, there's no particular
There's no
reason
special
behind it.
reason for it to be that way. It just
Yeah,
is.
exactly. Yeah.
So now the question is, let's say God's nature is that according it's in line with God's nature that you should not harm an innocent soul. Okay, what makes that good? That is just God's nature. Even if that is the case, what makes that good? Why do you consider that good? Um, it is still arbitrary because you're saying, well, as opposed to God's nature being aligned with the fact that innocent soul can be harmed. It is the case. God nature is aligned with the moral fact that an innocent soul should not be harmed. Okay, but then it is an arbitrary kind of nature of God. Because so I think yeah, it's nothing. It's not a response at all. You have not responded to the Euthyphros dilemma at all. And all I mean, and one other question would be, you are aware of how let's say that our moral intuitions are very reliable, in terms of that what God intends for us to do, or how God intends for us to behave. uh, I think so even if our moral intuitions are aligned or very reliable in terms of telling us what is good in the eyes of God for us, even if I admit to that, there is no way for Hamza or any other Muslim to actually know, well, that God has made this kind of morality applicable for every creation that He has created. Maybe in other planets or in other universes, He has created other beings where He has made different laws. So, and where different kind of morality applies.
Yeah, so
And
calling it
He has
objective,
no, yeah.
yeah,
So I mean, yeah, claiming that no, it is impossible for God to declare that and that harming an innocent soul is morally good. He has no way to determine that. He
yeah, yeah.
has
I totally
absolutely no way to
understand. I
determine that.
think I think when and this is an excellent point, because when you say that it is that intuition has to be universal, right? And for it to be universal, you have to be from a very, what do you call, evidential point of view. You have to exclude any possibility of any alien race existing that has an intuition that is contrary to this intuition, right? And if it is not, or if you cannot find that out, I think then the judgment stays suspended. right? Or it should stay suspended, right? Whether it is objective or not, at least to my
Exactly.
mind, it seems that way.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, for example, let's say enslaving conscious beings for sexual pleasure, right? Is that something that they would consider morally good? Now, if you ask someone, at least these Muslims or Christians, I
Yeah,
don't think they
everybody
would
will say
agree.
no, no, no,
No,
and
no.
then they'll,
But
yeah,
then,
but then there'll be a clause. But
yeah,
yes,
but but now the
yes,
question is, what about? I mean, I'm just thinking, what about the concept of whos that they have in heaven? Now,
right.
unless they admit that they're not even conscious, which is just like robot, which would be quite kind of pathetic, right? I
Pathetic,
don't think
right?
they'll
Really
admit to that.
pathetic.
That
And
they're
then,
just like
yeah,
robots.
yeah,
They're um, like masturbation machines or something like that, just like dolls, kind of.
yeah,
And don't know plus,
totally.
but that is what it would imply then. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
if they want to admit that no, they are conscious beings who are doing something, this kind of sexual servitude under these men who are who have earned heaven. The
Mm,
question is, okay, is that correct? Is it okay? Would you say that, yeah, then in that situation it's okay? So you would say, yeah, I mean, yeah, they would say, yeah, that's okay, because yeah, that's our reward and all of that. But in any other scenario, if that would have happened on Earth, you would have said, no, that is morally wrong. So I think it is. They have no way to determine what kind of moral rules God applies to other universes, other places. I mean, they could say that no, these whos, God will make these whos feel pleasure from it, right? They will be happy doing it. Well, the question is, well, do you think that that's okay? What if you are able to control someone? Let's say, like kind of grooming like activities where the person is not even aware that they are being abused in that manner, right? So you would say, yeah, that person is not getting bothered by it. Why would you declare that incorrect or morally bad? You would still say that it's bad, because you even if that person is not aware of the fact that you're sort of manipulating them, you would still consider it morally wrong. So again, they have no way to know what kind of rules God have applied to other kind of other universes, other planets, other creations who are conscious. So yeah, it is just a claim that they made.
right, totally. Yeah. All right, Madhan, you want to add something? Madhan, you're even there?
I don't think Madan is there. Yeah,
Yeah.
let's. You want to
All
review
right.
the video a bit further?
Yeah, let's review the video.
You have not played the video, Philo? What's going on?
Yeah, I'm speaking on mute. I I I talked about Rustam, and I said Rustam's. I was just reading Rustam's this thing, and said if you wait 15 minutes, maybe we can open the link and let guests come in. But anyways, let's play the video, right?
God must exist. But as I said, there are alternatives. Let's address the alternatives. We ready for the alternatives? Good. So the first one was biology. I'm sorry, it just doesn't work. I do apologize, Darwin and everybody else. It just doesn't work. And this doesn't dismantle the Darwinian mechanism. No, I'm not. Don't make that false inference. But you can't now use it as a basis for your meta-ethics. Okay? You can't use it for moral ontology. You can't use it to explain the source of objective morals and to explain why morals are objective. Why? Well, let me quote you Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin gave an extreme example as well. He basically said, if men were reared under precisely the same conditions as hive bees, there can hardly be a doubt that our unmarried females would, like the worker bees, think it a sacred duty to kill their brothers, and mothers would strive to kill their fertile daughters, and no one would think of interfering. It's true. Because if we as human beings were reared under precisely the same conditions as the hive bees, if that's the case, then we wouldn't think it's morally wrong to kill our fertile daughters. Now, if you extend the example and you start talking about the nurse shark, if you watch National Geographic, it talks about the nurse shark, and they did some studies or some observations, and they found that the nurse shark male, I believe, bites the fin of its mate and wrestles with it before it mates. That's tantamount to rape. So if we were reared precisely under the same conditions as the nurse shark, who would think rape? No problem, right? God forbid, right? But you get my argument here. So if morals are just about this rearing, you're reared based upon certain biological conditions, then what happens? Number one, morals are not objective anymore because they're subject to inevitable biological changes. Also, morals are not objective anymore because they lose their meaning. There's actually no meaning behind any morality if it just happens to be a kind of biological reality.
Again, I mean, how he has defined
I'm just checking
objectivity,
if
right?
Madin is here.
Yeah,
Madin,
I
are you
mean,
there?
how he has defined objectivity once again. He's saying it will not be objective because it will be subject to biological change. Well, you know what? God's rules can also change, at least as they're applicable to humans. I mean, I think we have mentioned the Khidr story quite a few times.
Yes, totally.
If they continue to claim that God's morality does not change, well, can God declare unaliving an innocent child who is innocent, at least until that point? Can God declare or that morally good? If they say no, then I think they're not aware of this Khidr story. And if they say yes, then your entire sort of case falls
Objective, yeah,
apart.
yeah, yes.
Because you just said no, objective morals exist. We cannot do this. It cannot be declared. We cannot be possible. It is not possible for God to do for it to be morally good. Well, it can be morally good under your framework. In fact, it was morally good. Let me give you another example: the story of Hazrat Ibrahim, when he, according to most Orthodox Muslims, there I think would be some Muslims who might say that no, that was not the case. But according to most Orthodox Muslims, Prophet Ibrahim was revealed, got a revelation from God to sacrifice his son. Now, the question is, they would always say, no, no, God did not let him do it. That is not the question. The question is not this. The question is this: what Hazrat Ibrahim was actually trying to do, was that morally good or not? Let me ask you this, and let me give you an analogy for that. Let's imagine a person wants to murder um, another guy. He aims his gun and he presses the trigger.
And there's no bullet in
But
it.
yeah,
Yeah.
let's say the bullet gets stuck for whatever reason. He's not
No,
able to
there is
fire
no
his
bullet.
gun.
It's let's
Let's say
consider
there's
there
no
is no
bullet, but
bullet.
let's say
Yeah.
let's say there's a bullet, but it gets stuck, and he's not able to actually kill that person. Now the question we are asking now: would you say that now because he was not able to murder, his action is okay? No, you're gonna say his attempt to do that thing was also morally wrong. So
No,
my
most of
question,
the courts in the world would find him guilty.
exactly,
It's an attempt to
exactly,
murder. It's an attempt to
exactly,
murder.
exactly, exactly. So I think, and then the question would be, well, that is exactly the scenario which applies in case of Hazrat Ibrahim. He, for all intents and purposes, had sacrificed his son. It was just at the last moment God changed him, replaced him with
Yeah,
another animal,
but in
right?
his mind, he would have
In his
done it.
mind, he would have done it, and God actually, sort of in remembrance of that act, Muslims actually celebrate that act every year. If
Yeah,
that is
kill.
not the
Yeah,
case, it was an immoral act that he was trying to do. Why are you celebrating it? You should have said that, okay, that Ibrahim, when he got this revelation, if it was objectively true that you cannot harm an innocent child, Ibrahim would have said, well, it is objectively true that you should not harm an innocent child. Therefore, I will not do it, God, even if you say it. In fact, God, I think it might be a test from you,
Yeah. Yeah.
so I
Totally.
will not do it. But this is not what happened. You celebrate the fact that he actually tried to obey God and actually
You almost
do it.
finished the
He
job.
almost did it. He almost
Yeah.
did it. He had actually, if he was doing it with a gun, actually he had fired that gun.
Yeah.
It's
Totally.
only that the bullet got stuck at the last
Yeah.
moment, or God made the bullet disappear. But
Okay.
the
We
question
we
is,
have
yeah,
we have a
yeah,
fanboy. Sorry,
hmm,
Kyle, you want to finish your thought, and then I'll.
yeah,
I think there is a fanboy who wants
hmm,
to jump into our stream. So
hmm,
maybe I'll give him the link, and maybe he can come in and you know put his thoughts,
yeah,
and maybe defeat us in
yeah.
our
You're welcome.
argument, right?
Hey, you're welcome. Yeah, you have heard these guys, right? You must have listened to these guys. You must have be aware of these. You see, you cannot be a complete or a what you'll call a good believer if you're not aware of these arguments and you don't know how to respond to them. You should know how to respond to them. So I think you must have learned this from Amir Haq and Orthodox Muslim.
Yeah,
So
or
please
even
do let us
Muslim
know what the
Lantern.
response is. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, Muslim Lantern, all of these people. So let us know what come on and let us know what the response is. And Muslim
yeah,
Lantern
yeah.
has,
If you
let me
want,
tell
then
you,
I can. Hmm? I'm saying if you want,
Muslim,
I'll make the
yeah,
link public, and you can jump in and put forth the arguments.
yeah.
What is this? Philo ibn Amir Haqwa ibn.
I don't know what's Libiano.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah,
Madan, you there, or you? I'm not quite sure what's happened.
I think he's gone to sleep.
Yeah, Madan. Okay.
Yeah, he'll be back
Yeah,
if
I
he's
think
able
this.
to.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know
Are
if
we
there's
done here?
anyone.
Yeah.
I don't
Are
know. I
we?
mean, we can review it further, but yeah, I think there are a few more things in the video.
Otherwise, we'll make the link public, right? Let's
I
make the
think we
link
can make the
public.
link public right now, and let's see who comes on. And then in
Yeah,
the
I
meanwhile,
think
we can continue
Mystic
listening to the video.
Mystic Spider is more than welcome
Yeah, yeah,
to jump in.
yeah. Jump in and defend against these arguments. Based on what you've learned from these guys. Please do come on.
Yeah, I think we always try to have a very cordial conversation, and if you have a good argument, I think we have no problem in
Yeah,
agreeing to it. Basically, yeah, it's not that we are like heavily invested into believing incorrect arguments. I mean, if you have a really good argument, I think we are willing to listen to it, and if it appeals to us, I think we'll change our minds as well. And maybe it's not
we,
immediately
we
we'll
we'll
say
stop.
okay.
We'll stop raising this objection.
Yeah, we'll stop raising this
You'll
objection, but
solve this.
yeah,
I don't know. You'll solve this how maybe two millennia old argument.
yeah, it's Plato's Euthyphro, right? So it's at
How
least
old is Plato?
2300 years. Yeah, at
Exactly.
least 2300
So yeah,
years, right?
please, yeah, please come and solve this problem. 2300-year-old problem.
Yeah, I think, see, this problem is a logical problem, and I don't
Exactly.
think there is a way to it's solve it. I think
Exactly. I think
had
the
that been
moral,
the case,
the gist of mm, the response to the moral argument is Euthyphro's dilemma
hmm,
and the is-ought problem.
yeah,
I think both of these
both
combined,
of
I
these
think you
are,
don't need anything. You don't need
yeah,
anything else.
yeah. They just you cite these two, and then you just can't say anything. I mean, let me just make it, pin the link, and then we'll continue looking at the video.
Yeah.
Okay, what is it? Okay. I think for some reason I am unable to. Okay, now I am able to.
Okay, you'll have to bring up the video. We cannot see it right now. Okay.
Yeah. All right, now the video is on, and as well as the link is pinned, I guess. And anybody who wants to jump in to have a conversation, Mystic Seven Spider, you're more than welcome to jump in and have a cordial conversation. Put forth your arguments. Maybe, and this is not a what do you call? Tanz nahi maar rahe hum, right? We don't want to make poke fun at you. If you think that Amir Haq has better arguments, maybe he has. You think Muslim Lantern has better arguments or Orthodox Muslim has better arguments? Yes, probably they do. So if you remember those, please do come and just, at least you know the gist of it and you can tell us that gist, right? So anyways, let's get back to the video.
There's the moral value and meaning behind morals. They're gone, it's finished, khalas, as we say, right? So from that point of view, I don't think biology or the Darwinian mechanism is very strong to explain the objectivity of morals. By the way, it can explain how we have the capacity to formulate ethical rules. Of course, like natural selection, according to the moral philosopher Philip Kitcher, you could basically use natural selection to come to the conclusion that yes, this is a basis for why we formulate ethical rules. Fine, but that's not our discussion today. So biology is out the window. What's next? Who remembers what's next? Social pressure. What if all human beings, and this is the kind of humanist approach to moral values, because a lot of humans believe that moral values are actually objective. And they say, yeah, when rational human beings come together, we'll decide, and it'll be objective in that sense. Well, I don't think so. Because think about a lot of moral pressures in our society. For example, Nazi Germany in the 1940s, there was some social pressure in some way, some kind of consensus. Fine, it wasn't 100%, but there was something going on that really, groups of people came together to think it was okay to kill Jewish people and to murder them and to think that they're evil, which we know is objectively morally wrong. So if we use social pressure as a basis for objective moral truths, then we have a problem here. Because moral truths are subject to inevitable social changes. And if you study social psychology, society changes. Just ask your grandma. Just look at TV. Like 20 years ago, MTV was like, I don't know, it's like reading the Bible. Honestly, look at MTV today. That's like almost porn 20 years ago. Not that I know, but you know what I mean, yeah? So it's mubalagha, I'm being, it's hyperbole. So you get my point, right? So it's a crude example, but there are inevitable social changes. Now, even if you study social psychology, you see that social norms are developed, and they're developed because of two main things: informational social influence and normative social influence, which basically is based on the fact that we have a need to belong and we have a need to feel certain. So if I have a need to belong and I have an idea that's alien to your ideas, I may suspend my ideas and throw them away for a while and accept your views and ideas just to belong. Conversely, the other one is that basically we have a need to feel certain. So if I'm uncertain about something, I go to the consensus. And that's how social norms are developed, and social norms change over time. So if our moral values as a result of society and social norms, then we have a big problem, because they're going to be subject to inevitable social changes. And for me, morality loses its meaning, objective morality loses its meaning, and it's subject to inevitable social changes. So from that point of view, it doesn't explain objective morals at all. Social pressure doesn't explain objective morals in any shape or form. We have another alternative, which is called moral realism.
All right, I just want to add one thing over here. I mean, I'm not quite sure whether the social pressures, dictate the objective moral values or not, but social pressures do dictate a large part of the morality. If that weren't the case, and you can say it's more of a social construct that makes things move in a direction which you at least think that certain things are really frowned upon, right? And that's what eventually becomes a moral edict in a sense, right? I mean, if that weren't the case, probably you would say then what happened to Nazi Germany was also due to the social pressures. right? If that weren't the case, then that wouldn't have happened. And I don't think so. You can at least say, somebody could come and say that no, that was not due to social pressure, but that was due to the God. I think that will be a horrendous characterization of what transpired after, the World War II, right? And how Nazi Germany was subdued. So I think the evidence is more on the side of the social pressure theory, at least in terms of that particular example. Otherwise, I don't think that theists have anything to show in that case, at least. Just that they can point at it and say, if they had won, then there wouldn't have been any objective moral, I think that's a mischaracterization of the whole situation. I think it is more of a social bending that, gives rise to the morality, what it is. You can still claim whether that this whatever moral edicts or norms we have, whether they are more, objective or not, right? So, and I'm not talking about at least ontology of it at this point. Maybe ontology lies in our biology. It's quite possible, but that's not my claim, at least as of now.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
All right, Madin, you have gone missing, or is Madin there? Okay, I think. All right, so then I have made. Is there anything more to it, or shall we keep going on this video, or?
No, I think we have covered the main gist of it.
Then I think we can. I think we have the link open, but I don't think anybody is gonna join. So what I'll say is, if anybody wants to join in, the link is open, and it's right now on screen. So if you want to join, maybe hop on and then have a conversation. Let me ping Mahadin as to what happened. Okay, let's play until
Now, moral realism agrees and it says, yes, there are objective moral truths. There are objective moral values. Moral realism says, yes, but they do not require foundation. They just are. I find this a little bit difficult because we require an answer to the question, why is it objective? Where did it come from? Remember, meta-ethics is about answering the question, why is this moral value objective? And what's its foundation? Where did it come from? It's almost ignoring meta-ethics in a way, saying we can't answer the question, or the only way to answer it is they just are, get over it, move forward. This is also known as moral objectivism as well. But for me, it gets a little bit more tricky when we understand morals as moral duties. Because when we're thinking justice exists and compassion exists, we don't think of that in some kind of abstract way. Because when we say, yes, this is the compassionate thing to do, this is the just thing to do, we are obligated, we have a duty, right? I'm duty bound to be compassionate in certain contexts, especially, as medical practitioners, you have to show that compassion, you have to show that fairness, etc. You have a moral duty. It's not only recognized.
Yeah, I just wanted to cover this moral realism part that he just, sprint past, basically, right? Just saying that, moral, how can you, moral realist claims that there are some objective moral, values that exist in thin air, basically, right? And that's how they are. That's the foundation, right? I think it's a mischaracterization. While it might be true that certain things, maybe, someone might say that objective morals rest on the harm principle, basically, right? Not harm principle, but the basic innate nature of suffering, right? Or innate nature of goodness itself, right? Basically, I'm not using the word evil, and I'm using suffering, right? And that's what guides morality, right? That's what the foundation of morality is. And that while that might be true, and there is no, there's no way of asking a why question. Why is it so? And Hamza says that you can't ask that why, but that's a problem for his own foundation as well. You can't ask, if you are ultimately pushing your foundation to God. I think you have the same problem. Why is God good? Why is his nature good? I think exact same questions you are also unable to answer. So what's the difference, Hamza? I'm not quite sure. Right,
I agree.
Kevin?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. No, that is the
So,
case.
right, I don't know. I mean, why is it? I mean, why do these guys not think that the same problems apply to them as well? The same why questions are going to ultimately apply to their foundational, whatever reality they claim to be, are going to be applying. These same foundational questions are going to apply to them as well. I'm not quite sure why they just ignore it. It's pretty obvious to me, at least, that it's they apply in a similar, with similar force, rather, I would say.
Recognizing that justice exists somewhere in the world and compassion exists, but what explains that drive to fulfill those moral duties? Moral realism doesn't explain that. Because moral duties are owed. Owed to whom? Do you see the point? And that's why it makes sense of God's commands, because it's owed to God. The sense of moral duties makes sense of God's commands from that point of view.
No, no, no.
So
Let's not. So, why do we owe anything to God? What makes us owe anything to God? Why do we owe any moral duties to God? He has
Totally.
to
Yeah.
explain that. He has not explained that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Uh,
he's just,
God is commanding us. Let's say, even
just one
even
minute
if
ago.
yeah,
Yeah. Just
yeah.
1 minute ago, he was hopping that point. Then you
Mm,
have to ask the questions why.
why?
Uh,
So yeah,
right.
let me ask you why. Why would even if let's say God has commanded us to do this, why do we owe Him? Why do we owe to obey Him? Right? Why should we owe? Why do we owe our obedience to Him? Right? Now, I think
Exactly.
I mean, and let me ask you, or let me discuss a hypothetical scenario. Let's say God commanded us to do something and said, "Okay, this is my command. If you follow it, now right now this is their model. If you God has commanded them to do something, and if you follow that command, God will reward you, and if you don't follow that command, God will punish you." Now, what if God commands human to do something, and He says, "Well, I have commanded you to do something. You have to do that, even though this will end in the end cause you some sort of harm or pain, and I will not give you any sort of positive reward for it.
Would you
If you
still do
obey
it?
me, yeah,
Hmm.
if you obey me, it will ultimately harm you somehow. It will give you some sort of suffering, even if it's not unlimited. Let's say it's limited kind of suffering, and that's all. He said, Obeying my command will result in you suffering, and not obeying will actually result in you having some sort of pleasure."
Yeah.
Would you still obey God's commands? Would you still say, "Well, we owe our duties to God"? Well, no, you will say, "Well, no." In that case, or I think Hamza would claim that no, we would still obey God. Although then you'll have to ask, why does it make any sense? Why would you obey
No,
God?
I think they have two responses for this. One is,
Mm.
someone like Mufti Yasir Nadeem Al Wajidi would say
No,
is
that's not
that no,
possible.
no, no, God, yeah, that's not possible.
Why not?
Not
Why
from our
not?
worldview, that's not possible, right? And
Why not?
that's the question.
If
I think they
God
don't
can,
understand.
if God can make you suffer for good things in this world, right? You would say, well,
Right.
if you, according to them, it's good to pay charity or do some things, help someone, even if it sort of causes you some sort of harm. Well, if he can do you that to you in this world, why is it impossible for God to do this? What makes you think it's impossible?
Right.
Maybe that is the test of your true obedience.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this once again. I made an opposite scenario. Let's not make it opposite. Let's just make it slightly different. Let's say God commands you to do something, and He says, even if you follow my commands, I'll not give you any reward. You'll not get any pleasure. nor will you be harmed or punished if you don't obey me. So there is no concept of punishment or reward. Would you still obey God?
Yeah.
Would you still owe anything to Him? The question is this: do you think you still need to obey Him? Why? If you say yes, why? Why do you think you have to obey God? And if you realize that
I
no,
think I
actually,
think their worldview falls apart as soon as they say, and Hamza says this all the time, that we obey God just because of who He is, right? And so
says
his response from, if that's his fundamental principle, then he should obey in all the scenarios that you have mentioned, Kelly. But and I'm not sure
right.
what his answer would be on these questions, or if he has even thought through these problems or not.
Yes.
But
What I mean, that
I'd
question
be very surprised if he, if he says yes, he'll
says
still
no.
follow. Yeah, yeah, he'll
No,
still
no, you'll not
follow.
be. I will not be surprised. He has even in one of his videos, he has given the response that he will still obey God even if it will cause you ultimate harm. He has said that.
And eternity of hell.
Hypothetically speaking, I think
He
I
has
might
said that
even.
if, yeah, he
I
said
think
that even of eternity of hell, he would follow. I think I highly doubt it that
yeah, yeah.
if
It's
that
a,
would be the,
okay. Would you believe that means? I think he said that. So I think I have this written down in one of his videos. What he was saying was that would you still believe in God, or would you still be a believer even if it meant suffering, ultimate suffering? And he
yeah,
said, well, yes.
believer is
Now,
different than
believing is a
obeying.
problem. Now, believing is different because belief is not something in your control. No matter how much Muslims claim, believing is not in your own control. If it is, let me ask you this question. What if someone offers you $10 million and they ask you to do one thing only? Just for 5 minutes, truly believe that 2 plus 2 is equals to 5. Truly believe it. Now, let's say he has some sort of way to determine whether you truly believe it or not. Now, I'm asking you this question. Leave it whether he is actually able to determine that or not. I'm asking you this question. If someone offers you $10 million, if you believe just for 5 minutes that 2 plus 2 is equals to 5, can you truly believe that? No, you cannot, because you're not convinced by that.
Yeah,
So,
totally.
so belief is not in your own control. So even if it causes you harm, ultimately, you would still might not be able to you would most likely not be able to believe something else other than what you're convinced of. So yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm correcting myself. He said this about belief. Now I'm not sure if whether he will obey God if it will result in suffering or not.
Yeah, I'm highly doubtful of that fact, right? I mean,
I
but
think he
there
will
will,
not. I think they
yeah,
will never say no. What they will say is that no, that's impossible.
yeah, yeah. I think that's the answer. That's at least Wajdi kind of answer,
Yeah.
you know.
And then I think in that case, what I will say them, okay, is it possible that God has given you, and what I've already asked, if it is it possible that if God had given you free will, but there was no punishment or reward for, and He has given you commands as well, but there were no punishments or reward for that. You said, well, I'm giving you this command. Now it's up to you whether you want to obey me or not. I will not reward you. I will not punish you for not doing it. So now it's up to you. Would you still obey God? Would you care about God's commands in that case? I don't think so.
Right. We do have someone in on screen.
Okay, so it's okay. They've
Oh,
gone.
dropped out. BOL ball. Bowl. If you
Yeah,
want to join again, maybe join, and yeah, I don't know. Maybe just randomly clicked on some link and came in.
yeah, possibly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So okay. Do you want to review this
Realism is
further?
not
I think.
retentive either.
Is there anything worthy of?
I,
I think
I
this
don't
is.
think so. Yeah, I think we can. stop here. I don't think anyone has joined, so it's okay if you want to stop the stream, then we can just end it here.
Yeah, I think maybe Madan has some issue with the network. I think today, yeah, it's been strange, right? Madan joined and we couldn't realize that he was there. So I'm thinking there is some issue at Madan's side because
Yeah,
I
possibly.
truly, I truly didn't see him, and neither did you. I think both of us. Huh? Now he dropped out. Okay, maybe.
I don't know.
So we'll
Yeah, we'll ask him
schedule.
later. We'll
Yeah,
ask him
we'll
later
ask
on
him later.
what
Yeah,
happened.
we'll ask him later on. Anyway, let's listen on maybe a minute or two more and see if there's anything for us to critique, and then maybe we can close the stream if nobody else joins, right?
Okay.
And maybe let's make a last call to whoever wants to join. I think there is some strange things happening. Maybe it's due to StreamYard or something. In any case, okay, link is made public. Anyone who's listening, maybe not too many people listening. Maybe Hamza is in general boring. I think a couple of commenters said that earlier, right? Even Rustam said that. So yeah, maybe he's boring in general. But anyways, anyone who wants to join in and have a conversation, the link is public. You can click on and have a cordial conversation. I think maybe much more interesting conversation than Hamza, probably. But yeah, otherwise we'll continue with our.
There's another alternative. One would argue it's a rational alternative, and this is called constructivism. Now, I've taken this from an academic encyclopedia. You can find it online. I forgot the reference. I'll give it to you later. But basically, constructivism is the view that insofar as there are normative truths, for example, truths about what we ought to do, so moral truths, they are in some sense determined by an idealized process of rational deliberation, choice, or agreement. Now, you have to understand something. Constructivism doesn't say that as a result of using your rational faculties in a rational process, you're going to understand what is moral. No, that's epistemology, to find out what is moral. But what it basically says is that morality is construed through rationally, meaning the very fact that man is rational, that becomes a foundation for morality, and it explains the objective nature of morality. It's like the two sides of the same coin. So it's not just like, oh, I'm rational, therefore I'm going to find out in my own way what good is. No, that's epistemology. But rather, constructivism says that the very fact that the human being is rational, that is the foundation for morality, and it explains the nature of objective moral truths, why they're objective in the first place. Now, there's a big discussion. There are volumes of discussion. I don't want to get into it, but basically, one would argue, well, what kind of rationality are you going to use? Are you duty bound to even be rational, right? Because if rationality and objective morals are two sides of the same coin, then in order for objective morals to make sense, you should also be duty bound to be rational. But are you? You don't have to be. Many of us are really irrational anyway. And there are many studies, if you study the philosophy of the mind, and you study, for example, cognitive science, there are even theories that claim.
Can you pause it? What is that a fair objection?
No. I think
it seems a very, yeah. What do you mean duty bound to be rational? So, okay, so I think what he's trying to say is that for people who are claiming that based on rationality, you can determine objective, basically objective morals. And he's saying,
Right.
well, you're not even duty bound to be rational. Okay, I think it's if Hamza thinks about it a bit more, I think this kind of objection directly applies to his conception of God as well, because he said that God is all knowing and he knows all moral truths. Well, okay, and is God duty bound to sort of apply these rules or to follow some sort of duties or to give some sort of rights to humans? And let me ask you this: does God owe anything to humans? Do humans have any rights against God? No. Then what makes God follow those duties? What do you think of? I mean, whatever you think God's duties are. Of course, they would never admit that God has any duties, but they would say that God chooses to obey, to be good with humans.
For what reason? And that's one
Yeah.
of the
For what reason?
fundamental
Why?
problems.
Exactly.
And
What
one of the
stops him
fundamental
from not?
problems is
Yeah.
one of the fundamental problems is about promises as well, right?
Exactly.
Why would God has to follow or dutifully,
Exactly.
follow his own instructions, right? Or
Yeah.
promises.
God doesn't
rather.
know.
God doesn't owe to anybody, right? He can,
God didn't know
and there is
anything
a there
to
is
his
a there
creation
is a
according to them.
there is a hadith about it as well. If God wanted, I think maybe loosely you can relate. That is not exactly what the duty means or promise means here. So I'm comparing it the promise to maybe the free will, right? But still, kind of loosely, you can correlate the two, right? That if God willed, then He could have put everybody in the hell, right? And that could still happen due to His not being bound to any promises. God doesn't owe anybody anything, of course. So yes, He could. I mean, I brought that hadith, by the way, because it's more so in terms of free will rather than being duty bound. But I think it equally should apply to that being him being duty bound as well. I mean, he's not actually duty bound basically, and he does not owe to anybody in that respect as well. So if he feels like even if he does say in the Quran that all the Muslims will eventually end up in heaven, not necessarily. They could all end up in hell as well, right? Doesn't owe to anybody, right? So that's the kind of problem that they'll get into. Anyway, Kelly, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay. Shall we move on with a little bit more of it, or
I think we can stop the stream now. We've reviewed it sufficiently.
yeah? Okay, yeah. I think we can stop it over here. Yeah, I don't know what happened to Martin today. Otherwise, maybe we hijacked the English stream for once. But otherwise, it's Martin who, carries forward the torch. But other than that, if anybody is here, yeah, I think we're the second fiddles when in English streams. But this time we probably hijacked it. Anyway, so I don't think anybody's in the stream, but those of you who are going to listen to it later on, and I don't know how appealing the stream came out to be. Maybe not. If not, then maybe what you can do is just mention it in the comment section after the stream is over. But for everybody to know that we also have an English only channel, you can see it in the banner, that's scrolling down. It's youtube.com/@unveiling faith. And please, you can like, subscribe, and share our channel. And if you are capable enough financially, then you can support us at patreon.com/Philo Sapience or buy me a coffee, buymeacoffee.com/Philo Sapience, or super chats or super stickers or memberships or any other means that you can. And if you can't, if you're not able, then the best thing you can do is just share our channel wherever you go, whoever you meet and think that would like to listen to this kind of a content. Maybe you think that we can do, we can put forth better streams, better content, maybe then start suggesting those kind of contents that we can review. Or maybe if you want us to review something, then you can put those in the comment section below. And maybe be more proactive in suggesting us what we should be bringing forth for your consumption that will tickle your brains as well. So with that, I think thank you to my co-host Kelly and Martin. Martin, you want to have any final last thoughts?
No, I think it was. I think Hamza's video was quite had quite a few points for us to discuss, and I think we have covered the gist of it. So hopefully,
Yeah. I think
people.
maybe we haven't been able to cover all of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then Okay. With that, thank you everybody for joining, and see you in the next stream. Bye for now.